Every day my hands was burned. It's always redness, and they don't bother also to give some medicines because every day they do punishment to me.
কিন্তু বস 3 দিনের মাথায় আমাকে অফিসে নিয়ে যায়, ভয় দেখায়, জোর করে বাংলাতে বলা হয় যে আমাদের অফিসে স্টোর রুমে অ্যাক্সিডেন্ট হয়েছে, এই বলে আমার থেকে সই নেয়।
Pertama kali saya melihat teman saya berusaha berkomunikasi dengan seorang laki-laki, di situ saya mulai tahu bahwa ternyata pekerjaan itu yang akan kita lakukan di situ.
What lies beyond Singapore's shiny facade? What actually keeps the wheels of our economy turning? A garden city, Singapore prides itself on a constantly rising GDP and an obsession with efficiency, cleanliness and orderliness. But under the glamour lies the grim truth of its reliance and demand for cheap foreign labour to keep the city and economy running. With a large number of foreign workers working in Singapore, some of them are exploited and work in slavery conditions or servitude.
We're unique because we are so dependent on foreign workers. Like it or not, we tend to think that, we can survive fairly well as Singaporeans, but in actuality, the foundation of our economy, a lot of it is based on the 1.4 million foreign workers that are brought into the country.
They build our houses, right? They clean our estates, they drive our buses, they take care of our elderlies, our children, our family. So they are integral, not just in our economy, but integral in our everyday life as well.
When you have 1.4 million people, foreign workers that are here, there's bound to be exploitation, there's bound to be people who are vulnerable and being taken advantage of.
In 2016, there were an estimated 9,200 modern-day slaves in Singapore. Victims of human trafficking are modern-day slaves. According to the United Nations definition, foreign workers are trafficked victims if they are recruited by means of threat, use of force, or other forms of coercion, abduction, or deception for the purpose of exploitation. Exploitation includes sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs.
So sex trafficking is what most people think about, but actually the most common trafficking is labor trafficking, so exploitative labor. So in Singapore context, there's also domestic workers that usually we think about trafficking, we think about sometimes domestic workers too.
I sleep in the storage room, and regarding my food, I have only a small amount of food, and if I never do my job properly, or I never clean the house properly, so sometimes I don't have lunch, or sometimes I don't have dinner because they throw away my food. Before, when I was in the Philippines, the agent told me that my salary deduction was 6 months, but when I came here in Singapore, the agent told me that the deduction is 7 months. I received only $30 allowance, and the rest, the agency, they took the rest of my salary.
The domestic workers in Singapore are expected to wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning and continue working until 12 a.m. Or some of them have even reported working up to 2 a.m. in the morning, with only 4 to 5 hours sleep in between. They are also expected to work, sometimes not have a weekly day off. And this working condition, plus the fact that many of them come with a debt that they have to pay off over 7 to 8 months, or through salary deductions, means that they are very vulnerable to being abused and even to being trafficked.
Popo is checking on me if I wake up on time. So if for example, I wake up 5 minutes late, so she asked me to go inside the toilet, and then she commanded me to put my hands on the toilet bowl and then she poured a lot of dish on it, and then as a punishment because I wake up late, so I need to soak my hands there for 10 minutes or more than 10 minutes. Every day my hands was burned. It's always redness, and they don't bother also to give some medicines for me, and because they thinking that the medicine will be wasted because every day they do punishment to me. Almost every day they beat me already, and then not only my employer's mother but also my employer's sister. Or sometimes they hit my head against the wall, or everything what they want they did to me, or whatever they are holding they will hit it on me, and every time they go out they lock me inside the house. Every time they punish me, I was thinking that what is the big mistakes that why they cannot forgive me, why.
In these cases, we notice there are some common indicators of trafficking. These women are deceived about the working conditions. They also were physically abused. They were also restricted in terms of where they can go, who they can talk to, whether they can eat. All these conditions, all these are indicators of trafficking. As a society, how we treat our domestic workers, what are our expectations of their work, will also, either protect them or expose them to greater risk of trafficking.
After 7 months, when her loan was fully paid, Mary's employer did not allow her to break her contract. Locked in, Mary's only way of escape was by jumping out of the window. She broke her legs and was helped by another domestic helper who brought her to home. Mary was deceived about her work conditions. She endured a large amount of salary deduction to the order of 7 to 8 months of salary. She had no freedom of movement as she was always locked in the house. She had no contact with the outside world. She worked long hours and suffered physical abuse. All these are indicators of labor trafficking.
সবাইকে এই অবস্থায় টাকা কাটে, এইভাবে শোষণ করা হয়, কিন্তু কেউ মুখ খোলে না। শহরে ফ্যামিলি আছে, তো দেশে গেলে আবার আমি এইবার এই কোম্পানিতে আসি, প্রায় $3000 খরচ করে আসি। $1100-1200 টাকা টোটাল আছে, ওভারটাইম, বেসিক স্যালারি, আদার্স মানি। সেখানে আমাকে পে করা হয় ওই 20 টাকা হিসাব অনুযায়ী 600 থেকে 700 টাকা মতন আসে। এর মধ্যে আবার পরের মাসে যে পেপার দেয় এপ্রিলের, সেটা $28 করে সাইন করি নাই, কিন্তু অ্যামাউন্ট অনেক বেশি ওখানে থাকে, কিন্তু ওই পরিমাণে আমার টাকা দেয় না। 5 মাস মাথায় অ্যাক্সিডেন্ট হয়।
There are various forms of exploitation. It can be the disrespect of labor laws and the abuse of the workers' lack of information, workers' low education and low bargaining power. Saving costs by compromising the safety of such workers is exploitation.
আমি কাজ করা অবস্থায় কাজ করি, যেখানে কাজ জায়গা উপযুক্ত ছিল না। আমি বলতে দুজনা কাজ করতেছিলাম যে প্ল্যাটফর্মের উপরে, ওই প্ল্যাটফর্মটা উপযুক্ত ছিল না। আমি কাজ করার আগ্রহী ছিলাম না, তারপর আমাকে প্রেশার দেওয়া হয়, কিন্তু প্রেশার দেওয়া হয় শিফটে উপযুক্ত শিফটে ছিল না। আমি অনুরোধ করার পরেও সে কথা শুনি নাই, কাজ করতে হবে, কাজ না করলে পারে দেশে ফেরত পাঠানো হবে। ওই দিনে আমার অ্যাক্সিডেন্ট হয়, আমার আঙ্গুল কেটে যায়। কেটে দেওয়ার পরে আমার চিকিৎসা হয় অনেক সময় পর, 12 ঘন্টা পরে, ঠিক 11 থেকে 12 ঘন্টা পরে আমার অপারেশন হয়। কয়েক হসপিটাল ঘোরার পরে অ্যাক্সিডেন্ট হয়। আমি যে জায়গায় কাজে অ্যাক্সিডেন্ট হই ওই জায়গায় সেফটি রিপোর্ট করা হয়েছিল না, কিন্তু বস 3 দিনের মাথায় আমাকে অফিসে নিয়ে যায়, ভয় দেখায় জোর করে। বাংলাতে বলা হয় যে আমাদের অফিসে স্টোর রুমে অ্যাক্সিডেন্ট হয়েছে, এইগুলো আমার থেকে সই নেয়। এখন এই অবস্থায় দেশে যদি ফিরে যাই তা খুবই সমস্যা হবে। তবে আঙ্গুল যদি আমার আবার ভালো হয়, যদি এই মন যদি আবার পারমিশন দেয়, ভালো কোনো কাজে যেতে আবার অনুমতি দেয়, তা আমি আসার জন্য আবার আশা আছে, আমি আবার সিঙ্গাপুরে আসবো। কারণ সিঙ্গাপুর খুব সুন্দর দেশ, সিকিউরিটি সব দিকে সুন্দর, সবার এই দেশের মানুষও খুব সুন্দর মানুষ, সব ব্যবহার, সবার কালচার সবার খুব ভালো। আমার ফ্যামিলির সংখ্যা 7 জন। এখন আমার অবস্থায় এই অবস্থা আমি অনেক টাকা খরচ করে আসছিলাম, আসার পরে এখন এই অবস্থায় এখন যদি আমি দেশে যাই আমি তাদের খুব সমস্যা হবে। আমার 3টা ছেলে ছিল, 2 ছেলে বেবি টাইমে মারা যায়, কিন্তু ঠিক সেই সময় আমার স্ত্রী ঠিক মতন মেডিকেল করাতে পারি নাই বলে এই সমস্যা হয়েছিল। আমি জানি যদি না আসি আমার অনেক ঋণ আছে, এই ঋণগুলো কীভাবে শোধ দেবো।
The sole provider for his family of 7 back home, and with hefty agent's fees hanging over his head, Abdul faced every foreign worker's worst nightmare, being indebted and without work. Thus extremely vulnerable, Abdul succumbed to the pressure from his employer. His employer ignored the agreement, deceived him about wages while threatening to send him home. They ignored labor laws and forced him to lie to the authorities about his injury. All these are indicators of labor trafficking.
The root causes of trafficking is very different from country to country and region to region. There could be social reasons, cultural reasons, most commonly known economic reasons. Every single one is very, very different. Sometimes it's a devaluing of a woman. Sometimes it's because there is a lack of economic opportunities. So it could be a variety.
Deception or coercion is found in all cases of human trafficking in Singapore. Recruiters at source countries deceive the vulnerable of the nature or conditions of work. More often than not, victims take risks for economic reasons and for a better life, only to find out they have signed up for more than what they have agreed to.
Waktu itu mereka tidak ada ngomong apa-apa, cuma bilang, ya berapa uang yang kamu butuhkan, saya pasti kasih. Mereka mencoba untuk membuat saya tidak khawatir bahwa saya meninggalkan mereka, pulang akan membawa uang yang banyak. Saya tidak ada pilihan lain, karena memang saya butuh pekerjaan, saya butuh uang, maka ya saya memang harus pergi. Lalu hari itu saya berangkat menuju ke Batam. Sebelumnya saya nggak tahu apa yang akan saya lakukan. Cuman saya tahu, oh saya kerja di kilang. Saya tanya, apa yang harus saya lakukan? Salah satu dari mereka cuma mengatakan, kamu lakukan aja seperti apa yang kita lakukan. Kita kerja di sini, kita kerja di jalan. Jadi kamu nggak usah banyak tanya, kamu nggak usah malu, kamu nggak usah takut. Yang penting kamu dapat pekerjaan, kamu dapat uang, kamu bisa pulang bawa uang banyak. Pertama kali saya melihat teman saya berusaha berkomunikasi dengan seorang laki-laki, di situ saya mulai tahu bahwa ternyata pekerjaan itu yang akan kita lakukan di situ.
Women are recruited from developing countries and deceived about the nature of their work in Singapore. Instead of working as cooks, waitresses, or performers, they end up selling themselves against their will. For Iriana, she was not given food unless she agreed to work. She had no freedom of movement and worked excessive hours in order to pay off her debt owed to her exploiter, who paid her travel expenses. All these are indicators of sex trafficking.
I think that we tend to forget things from the source country. So you're talking about recruitment firms from Indonesia. Maybe the way they advertise it is not entirely true. And it's important that there are MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding, between the governments to actually create an environment where exploitation doesn't happen.
But what about those in transit? Could our strategic location for trade be used for a more sinister purpose? Singapore imports most of the goods that we consume, many of which involve slavery in their supply chains. As end consumers, are we complicit?
A lot of times we don't think about the clothes that we buy. Where do they come from? We don't think about even shoes or shampoos and things like that. And if you look back far enough, maybe a slave was being used to produce that product in which you buy.
Singapore is an international port for foreign fishing vessels to land their fish catch. Our fishery port serves as a docking and bunkering base for foreign fishing vessels operating in the Indian and Pacific Ocean. It is also a marketing and distribution center for fresh and frozen fish. Fish merchants conduct wholesale fish business, while fish retailers, fish processors, and institutional buyers come to this market daily to buy fish. Unbeknownst to us, some of the seafood that we consume is tainted with labor trafficking, modern-day slavery.
They come into Singapore with a promise that they will get a high-paying job, but in the end they would be deployed in this fishing vessel. And once on board, they find difficulties. They find the hardship. The wages are not the one they have been promised, and they will have to work for 3 years. They don't receive the salaries on board. They only receive, I think, about $50 on board. Then the rest, the owners will say that they will give it at the end of the contract.
When they land, they want their passport to leave the vessels. They have to pay the first and second engineer. They get cheated out of money. So these are all indicators of trafficking. So it's very clear to us, these men that are recruited by these companies, Step Up Marine, Beverly Hill, are actually traffic victims. Because they don't hold a work pass, they don't come under our jurisdiction. The employer of these fishermen is not a Singaporean. The ship is not registered in Singapore, so it's not a Singapore flag ship. Because if you're a Singapore flag ship, then Singapore legislation can apply. But because they are not, these fishermen do not, have protection under our local legislation for seafarers and the UN Convention.
And some of the people that I have encountered, some of them say that because of depression, because of some people cannot tolerate it anymore, they just jump into the sea. They take their own life. I think what we need is policy. There should be some jurisdiction that Singapore should have some say on this. We can really run after these illegal recruiters in the home countries of the fishers and also the agent here in Singapore. If we can prosecute them, I think there will be an end to this exploitation of these poor people.
Foreign fishermen transited through Singapore and were subsequently deployed on non-Singapore registered fishing vessels. Shocking practices of deceptive and fraudulent recruitment, financial and labor exploitation, as well as abuse and violence at sea were reported. This constituted a human trafficking problem that involved Singaporeans and players in Southeast Asia working in collusion to deploy men into hyper-exploitative working situations on fishing vessels. As an international player, Singapore needs to put in place laws and policies to close this loophole, to protect fishermen who come through Singapore from being trafficked at our doorstep.
Now, 150 years ago, there was an abolitionist movement all over the world. Countries abolished that form of slavery. They decided that this was unacceptable, and they collectively said so, and that form of slavery was abolished forever. We need the same type of thing to happen now. We need a new second-generation abolitionist movement.
which is why it's so important to adopt the Palomar protocol, because under the Palomar protocol, it's more comprehensive that, for example, the part where I talked about means, coercion doesn't have to be physical. It can be emotional. It could be everything from I would tell everybody about the sex work you're doing in Singapore to I will threaten and hurt your family in the home country to I actually know where your children go to school. And it could also extend more to that, could be a relationship with a pimp even, and then having to use that as an emotional bargaining chip.
Time is ticking for potential victims of human trafficking, as it is estimated that a person is enslaved every 12 seconds. In 2016, there were an estimated 45.8 million people worldwide trapped in some form of slavery. The Singapore government set up a Trafficking in Persons task force with a national plan of action to fight human trafficking. In 2015, Singapore acceded to the Palermo Protocol, a United Nations protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons. The protocol requires Singapore to be compliant with the requirements of the conventions to arrest trafficking organized crime and to provide assistance to victims of trafficking. An NGO which works with women and girls received 22 victims in 2016, an increase of more than 50% compared to the previous year. Whatever the reported number, it is generally underrepresented because many cases go undetected, because victims are threatened to not draw attention to themselves, nor raise red flags that might cause them to be punished, particularly by being sent home. Sex-trafficked victims are told by their exploiters to keep quiet, and if not, they risk going to jail. With these initiatives, Singapore remains a Tier 2 country on the US State Department's country watch list. A Tier 2 country is one that does not fully meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking. However, it is making significant efforts to do so.
There is a number of reasons why Singapore has been rated by the US State Department as a Tier 2 country, mainly because we never had a designated law. Our prosecution rate was very low, and also the penalties were not high enough. However, at this point, the government has now invested in a task force. We, as of 2014, have a designated law, and we're just waiting to see what the impact of that law will be. There has been training for the frontline police officials, but I think there's a lot more we could do.
Though policies and laws are important, we also need to start the movement as individuals to be socially responsible consumers and employers.
To combat trafficking, we need to take a community approach. For the case of trafficked domestic workers, we are talking about everyday person who may not realize that they can be complicit in trafficking. We're not just talking about whether an individual is involved in trafficking or not. We're talking about whether a society stands up against trafficking or not. This is why we feel that everyone in Singapore has a role to play in combating trafficking.
We need to engage the private sector. We need to have them be a part of this in a way that allows them to feel comfortable, because if they use their leadership, look at their supply chains, if they get actively involved, that will add to the other partners that are out there. We need people to step up, to get involved, to accept some responsibility, and as a result of that, I think this is what is going to be the turning point for helping us to be able to address this problem.
There is a lot of advocacy in different countries where they're trying to make companies more accountable to the shoes they produce. Where do they come from? Do the workers get fair wages? There are web pages online where they can tell you the products that are free from slaves. It's very important to go online and check what kind of products you're buying. Is it contributed by a slave? I think it's very important to look beyond the surface, ask the deeper questions, and then being able to be there to support an individual. Understanding the conditions of our foreign workers and being empathetic towards them. The best thing anybody can do when they think there is a person who is potentially a trafficking survivor is to contact the police. And from there, the frontline police will surface the case up to the investigative branch. Our Singapore Police Force has a designated investigative unit that does human trafficking cases. A lot of people say that if they're not trafficked here to Singapore, then they would be trafficked elsewhere. I think that that's an extremely fatalistic way of looking at the situation. Every single life counts. There's always something we can do, and we need to look at what are those things and actually work on it.
As consumers or businesses, we ought to do whatever we can as socially responsible individuals to prevent fellow human beings from falling prey to traffickers and exploiters who profit hugely at the cost of destroying lives. Human trafficking is the second largest global business in the world, with an annual profit of $150 billion. Raising awareness of this heinous crime is the cornerstone to combating human trafficking. Whenever there is a demand for commercial sex, there will always be a supply of boys, girls, and women to meet that demand, of whom some could be victims of trafficking. As consumers of products and services, we can consume less as consumption drives demand for cheap labor. By buying selectively, we use the power of our dollars to send a message to the companies. As responsible citizens, we can even advocate for legislations to protect all those who contribute to building Singapore's economy.